That one.
Okay, I think we are recording now.
Super. Okay, and hopefully you can see the screen okay, yeah?
Yes.
Cool. So, good morning, I think, still. Is it just about morning still to everyone in the US? So good morning to everyone in the US.
Yeah, it's 10:30 in the EST.
Okay, 10:30, so still morning. Good morning, everyone, then. It is only me who is in the afternoon. So good morning, and thank you once again for having me. Very, very kind to be invited back, so I mustn't have done a too bad job last time. So yeah, here today to talk to you about becoming JavaScript Developer 1 certified. This is a fairly new certification. I was I got it, I think, within the first month or so of it being released. So yeah, just wanted to share some things I learned about it. I also teach the courses for JavaScript Developer 1, so I can give you a little bit of insight around that as well. For those who either weren't here last time or don't know me or are watching this and have no context of who I am, my name is Paul Battisson. I am the COO of Cloud Galacticos. I've got 14 Salesforce certs, I think. Been awarded the MVP status 7 times now. If you want to find out more about me, you can go on Twitter. I am at pbattisson. I am pbattisson everywhere because I'm consistent, and it's a fairly unique name. I've got the Cloud Lights TV YouTube channel if anyone's interested in watching that. I am a Salesforce certified instructor, and I'm also the author of the Learning Salesforce Development with Apex book and the upcoming Mastering Apex Programming book, both of them available for order and or pre-order on Amazon if you are interested. And that is all you need to know about me. So, excuse me. I want to start off this, kind of talk through this certification by by looking through this quote. And this is one of those super overused quotes because everyone loves quoting Sun Tzu. But one of the things that I teach the certification courses. I manage a consulting company. I've worked with a lot of different consultants. Help run a user group myself. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you pass the Salesforce certificate? How do you get ready for it? What's the secret? And honestly, the secret is just spending time looking through what is in the exam and what is in the certification and looking at the areas you're weak at. There is no golden magical way of passing a Salesforce exam, or any exam really, but particularly a Salesforce one, other than going through all of what's in the certification bit by bit, seeing what your strengths are, seeing what your weak areas are, focusing on improving the weak areas and really tightening up the strong areas, just so that you can know exactly how to pass. Okay. One of the things that I always remind people is that on the Salesforce exams, you don't need to get 100%. You should try and make sure you understand everything in the exam, but it's a one-off exam. Okay. It's not, in all those different certs I've passed, there are things that I have known that I answered questions on and got right, that if you ask me now, what's the answer to this question, there'll probably be a few that I get wrong. Okay, I don't remember everything. I can't remember certain governor limits off the top of my head, things like that. There's things that you're only going to know for the exam. So just prepare for the exam, make sure you're ready for it, but then use the information that you get out of it to help improve you overall as a developer. Okay. So with that, let's talk about the JavaScript Certified Developer 1 certification. So this is new out this year. It is targeted at developers who have a good working knowledge of JavaScript. Obviously, it is targeted at developers. The clue is in the name. So if you are an admin, it's probably not meant for you. It's particularly focused on those who have a good working knowledge of JavaScript. So not Apex development. Okay, so this is a big change for Salesforce. As it started off in Aura, but it's a big continuation of that change of introducing another language as a first-class language on the platform. So prior to Aura being released and prior to Lightning Web Components really being released and used in anger, the only first-class programming language on the platform was Apex. Now we have Apex as the first-class language on the back end and JavaScript as the first-class language on the front end. Okay, so it really elevates JavaScript into the Salesforce ecosystem in a way that wasn't done before. And it is about knowing the language in general. Okay, so JavaScript is a very big, broad language. This isn't about knowing certain things to do with React or Angular or jQuery or things like that. It's not even about knowing certain things to do with Lightning Web Components. It's about understanding the language itself so that you can use it in a variety of different use cases. And what I would say is, if you take this exam and pass it, and you obtain this credential, it's actually a good way of setting yourself up so you can do broadly more JavaScript development. So you can write things on AWS Lambda. You could, when Salesforce Functions comes out, which is meant to have JavaScript support, you'll be able to work with that. If you want to deploy a Node.js app on Heroku, this will give you a good grounding in JavaScript that will then make working with React, Node, Angular, Vue, all of these other things much easier. Okay. Obviously, because it's a Salesforce certification, it is looking for you to have some knowledge of Salesforce specific things, which is Lightning Web Components. And although that isn't part of the exam, it is part of the overall accreditation and certification through the Super Badge, which I'll talk through in a minute. And yeah, finally, if you're looking at kind of a marker as for how long you should have been working with JavaScript, it's probably a year to 2 years. So if you've got about 12 to 18 months in working with JavaScript daily, or at least every other day, then you should be feeling pretty good about taking this, okay? It is, as I say, about the JavaScript language, not about a particular framework. So in my career, I've worked with a lot of applications building things on AWS Lambda, on Heroku in Node.js. I've written React.js apps and React Native apps, which all use JavaScript. So I had a fairly good grounding. And although I wasn't doing it day to day for 1 to 2 years, I was doing it perhaps in say 2 or 3 month sprints where I just focus on JavaScript only for about 7 years. So it adds up. And so I would really recommend, if you haven't worked with JavaScript extensively, you do that, as it will really help out. So what is contained within this certification? There are 2 components to it. So it's a bit like the Platform Developer 2 or Einstein Discovery 1 or Einstein Analytics Consultant, sorry. There is the multiple choice exam, which we'll be talking through in detail. And there is the Super Badge, which I will also talk through at the end. The Super Badge is just a regular Trailhead Super Badge. You don't have to be going down this certification to do that Super Badge, but if you do that, if you want to get the certification, you need to have the Super Badge done. Okay, so 2 components. The obvious question, which everyone's going to ask, is which way round do I do them? My advice is actually to do them the Super Badge first and then do the exam. The reason being is, as we will talk about later, Super Badge is really hard. Requires a lot of thought and a lot of effort in it. And so by doing the Super Badge first, it's a big chunk of time out of the way, but it's all Lightning Web Components, it's all JavaScript. It will really get you kind of warmed up with the language a little bit. Certain things you won't have seen before. It does cover a lot of material. And then it'll help you identify where you're weak when you start reviewing the exam material, okay? So let's talk about the exam. So the exam is taken via Web Assessor, which is everyone's favorite tool. At the moment, because of COVID-19, you can use a laptop camera for Web Assessor exams, because there's no in-person ones. It is multiple choice. There are 60 scored questions, and there are 5 non-scored questions. So you will have 65 questions in total. There is a good question as to whether it's always the last 5 that are non-scored. I don't know is the answer, so just assume that they are all scored questions and then see which 5 it is that are not required. The 5 non-scored ones as well are questions that they are validating for future iterations of the exam. Okay, so if you can imagine they have a limited pool of questions, there's only so many questions you can ask about JavaScript and Salesforce, but JavaScript in particular. These extra questions are there so that they can validate them, see how many people are getting them right, tweak them as needed, and go from there. Okay. As with most other exams, there is a 65% passing score, so that means getting 39 of them right. There is no prerequisite for this exam, so you're not required to be Platform Developer 1 or anything, and it is a $200 exam with a $100 retake, again, like most of them. So fairly standard exam setup, fairly standard sort of criteria, but I point out here that kind of 65% passing score and 39 right. Again, that's your target to aim for, and see when you're reviewing things where you get to. So, excuse me. In terms of weighting, there are 7 different areas in this exam. Okay, and I apologize for the color scheme here. This is the only set of colors I could find in PowerPoint for a graph that meant you could differentiate them. So top right here, 23% is variables, types, and collections. We'll go through what that is in particular in a minute, but a big portion of the exam. Next is objects, functions, and classes at 25%. The biggest portion of the exam, bottom right in yellow, and then browser and events in green here, in like light lime green. So between them, that's what is that? 40. So that's 65% exactly, bang on, I think, unless my maths has failed me. No, that is 65% bang on. So yeah, if you get all 3 of those areas correct fully, you've passed the exam. Okay, so 3 areas alone in this exam can get you everything you need. Obviously, I want to cover the full gambit, but again, to point out, to use the phrase, you don't eat an elephant all in one go. You eat it, elephant burger by elephant burger. Same thing here. Focus on those big 3 areas. Make sure you get as many marks from them as you can, and then that will make it much, much easier for you. So those are the big things to focus on. The other areas, asynchronous programming here at 13%, server-side JavaScript at 8%. Then got debugging and error handling. Debugging and error handling at 7%, and then testing at 7% as well. So there's a few other areas to cover off. So really, if you could cover, asynchronous programming, variables, types, and collections, objects, functions, and classes, and browser and events, and get 90% of those questions right, you've passed. Okay. So let's go through all of these different areas in detail on what is involved. And these are the high-level things that you'll need to know about, okay? So in the variables, types, and collections, and hopefully you enjoy the kind of jokey, meme images on the way, as JavaScript, having worked with JavaScript for a long, long time, it is an interesting language, so you will be able to see some of those interesting things come out here. So the first thing you'll need to know about is the difference between let, between const, and between var. Let is obviously differently scoped to var and is the better one to use. Const cannot change or cannot be mutated in certain ways. So it's important to know the difference and when you should use each one. There will be questions where they say, which is the correct one here, or what is the difference in this and where does this live? So the big difference they'll probably show you is having var and let and talking about hoisting, and how if you have var, it's hoisted to the top or as far as it can go, so be that a function scope or be that the global scope, whereas with let, it is whatever block it is defined in, okay? So that's going to be the biggest one on those 3 for you to be aware of. You'll also get one around const, probably, where you'll have a const defined, which is like a string. and therefore can't be mutated. And then you'll have one which is like an object or an array, where you can mutate it, but you can only mutate the contents of the object or the array itself. Okay. There'll be some discussion of typing in JavaScript and type coercion. So you will get a question where it is putting a number and a string together, and it's saying, what does this put out? Will it be 5? Will it be 5 and 5? Will it be not a number, or the nan symbol, which is what you have here? Understanding the differences between those. You'll also need to know about what is truthy. So if you were to evaluate an if statement and pass in different items, do they return true or false or not? Okay, so you'll need to be aware of the difference between when something exists and it isn't, whether undefined is true or false, whether true and false are true and false, and what happens there. Working with arrays, so that'll mean looping through them, pushing things, popping things, and how to work with arrays, all that sort of stuff, using .map, using .filter, and so on. And then JSON as just a data type. So what the JSON data type is, what it represents, how to use it, how to parse JSON, how to utilize it to deal with objects in an easy-to-use notation. Okay, so one of the good ways of making sure you can understand that is if you can read through this right-hand image and completely understand why all of the different pieces are what they are, and the answers are what they are, then you should be good to go. Okay, the banana example is just a very useful one to talk about how JavaScript converts different values. Okay, so that's that 23% section. Next big section, or the biggest section rather, sorry, is 25%. That is this objects, functions, and classes. Okay, so you'll need to know what is the best implementation for something given a different scenario. So should you define something as an object? Should you define something as a function, or should you define something as a class, and why? Okay, so JavaScript is a very interesting object-oriented language where it is prototypical. It allows you to do OO in different ways. So understanding exactly how those different ways work and when you should implement them. So how do you define an object? Obviously, we've just mentioned JSON. So how you use JSON to define an object and put functions on it. How you define a class and what the difference between a class and an object is. How you can use a model, okay? What a model does and how it works, how you use decorators and how they work, and how you scope things correctly, okay? So they may talk about things like closures and things like that. It's a really important area, this one, because it kind of drives to the fundamental heart of what Salesforce are using JavaScript for. So if you look at a Lightning Web Component, you will see that your Lightning Web Component extends the base Lightning Component class. And that's kind of key here, that Salesforce are trying to help you understand a little bit of what they are doing. Okay? So really important to go through this. JavaScript, as someone who's worked with a number of other OO languages, JavaScript is both beautiful and horrific in the way it deals with OO. So, you just need to be able to get your head around it, and kind of, I think, especially for Apex developers, is understanding those differences and how to work with them. Okay. The next area is then the browser and events. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone here has been a hacker, like our hacker man here, and has used inspect element before to mess around with some CSS and check things, or see if they're getting errors in the console. That's what this is all about. It's understanding how to use events, how to handle events, and how to propagate them, because the Lightning Web Component framework uses standard JavaScript events, okay? So a little bit on what the event loop is, a little bit on how propagation and bubbling works, a little bit, excuse me, a little bit on how you can build these events and work with them across the DOM tree, how the DOM itself is structured and works, okay? And then there will be a discussion on browser dev tools. It is focused on Chrome, pretty much. I don't think they focus on anything else, but it's pretty much the Chrome developer tools, as they are the kind of gold standard. And there will be a small discussion around browser-specific APIs. I can't really remember exactly what this was about, but it's probably, my guess is going to be, this is something you can do in Chrome and Firefox and Safari. Why can't you do it in Internet Explorer? Is likely what that is going to be. So there'll be some specific things around that you just might need to be aware of, and just kind of keep an eye on. But the main part of this is always going to be kind of event handling and event management, because the browser-specific tools most people have used anyway. Okay, so big area of another key area of the exam, but one I always recommend people spend a lot of time looking at, because of the fact that it is very closely aligned with how Lightning Web Components works. And if you can understand how those events bubble up and then go through the DOM itself, so how you can bubble and how you can capture, then you will kind of understand a lot more around how Lightning works under the hood. 1 second, I'm just going to turn on the light as it has suddenly got very dark here. There we go. So the next area is debugging and error handling, and this is not that big an area and bigger topic, because there's really not a lot to cover in this. Okay, so you will be discussing try-catch blocks. You will be discussing catch functions in kind of promises, and you will be talking about how to use console.log, how to use debugging, how to set breakpoints, what a breakpoint is, and how to use them to work through your code. Okay, so for those who are just like Buzz here and just put console.log everywhere to output things, it will talk a little bit about the difference between console.log, console.error. I don't think it mentions my favorite, which is console.dir. But yeah, you should be comfortable using them, know how to put a breakpoint in, know how to find the breakpoint, know how to handle things. Okay, nothing too crazy there. It is a really small, small part of the exam. I think if I remember, it's 7%, which at 60 questions is there for about 4 questions. So you'll probably get one on, how does this console log statement work and what does it output? You'll get one on whether it's console.error or console.err, and then you'll probably get something around breakpoints as well. Okay, so you'll be able to see how those work effectively. The next section, which is one of the ones I actually think is the most important for everyone to really spend time looking at, not just for the exam, but for understanding how JavaScript works in regards to LWC, is the asynchronous programming section. For Apex developers, asynchronous programming is a bit of a foreign concept. So in the book I've got coming out in December, I spend a good section just talking about asynchronous programming, because Salesforce's view of asynchronous when it comes to Apex is really let's just do this later. Okay, and there is no callback mechanism. Okay, so it isn't like it's popping it on popping it to be run and then call back. It is just literally creating a task for something to be done later on. JavaScript in its asynchronous model are very different. JavaScript in its asynchronous model does have callbacks, is part of the event loop, and is part of the way JavaScript runs natively with the event stack. JavaScript itself, you need to remember, is a synchronous language. That is, it runs top to bottom in real time, but the nature of the web means that asynchronous is extremely important to it. So you'll need to really understand how asynchronous programming works and what that means. And so this little poem on the left here, roses are red and so are you, violets are blue, asynchronous operations are great, is kind of driving to the heart of that. Obviously, everyone knows it should be roses are red, violets are blue, asynchronous operations are great, and so are you. But it kind of is showing how those things work. So you will be asked to know about async and how that operates. You won't be talking so much around callback functions because this is 2020. And so Salesforce are trying to encourage you to look at things like the async and await keywords, what they are and what they mean. So if you've not used async and await before, you'll need to get comfortable with those. Promises will be a big part as well. Promises and async and await are basically the same thing, just written differently. So understand what that difference is, how that works, and what the importance of it is, and then also understand the event loop and how that holds together as well. So it's a really key area, and one that, you know, obviously when you take this exam, you're trying to learn as much as you can to pass the exam. I always encourage, you know, the students I'm teaching and anyone who asks me about it for my opinion, which you're now going to get, make sure you try and learn as much as possible that's really important to help you understand things. Don't learn just for the exam. You know, I've said about how much you need to pass. That's how much you need to pass, okay? That's one part. Try and learn these things to really understand what's going on here, because if you truly understand it, it will stick properly, okay? And it will also allow you to work your way back through it later on, okay? So on that, one of the things I would really recommend is for everyone to go and read this. I'll leave it up on screen for a second in case anyone wants to copy it down, or put it in the chat. This links to a Medium blog post called JavaScript Horse Racing. And the idea of the blog post is that it talks around having these different horse races where each of the horses is a JavaScript function. And it kind of drives to the heart of how the asynchronous kind of functions, and you know, how async and kind of the event loop and callbacks and all these things within JavaScript work. If you can read through that blog post, read it once and make sure you understand it, then go away for a day or two, come back and read it again, and this time try and make guesses as to which horse you think is going to come in first each time and why. And then if you get it wrong, understand why and go back again. And if you can go through that a few times, you'll then really get your head around how that whole model works. And the reason, again, this is so important is, I was working on a Lightning Web Component project the other week with a developer, and they just got into a little bit of a muddle going through things where, they were calling things and they were returning at different times, and they just hadn't got their head into that model of how things fire at different orders and different points. So we ended up actually kind of clearing their code away to one side and starting off from the basics and going through again. And we got out a much cleaner implementation, but it was really just helping them go through and understand that model. So again, really worthwhile reading that blog post. I cannot encourage you to do so enough on there. Another area you will be asked about is server-side JavaScript. This is really, really short. It's all focused on Node.js because that is what is meant by server-side JavaScript nowadays. So it is when to use Node.js, okay? And then the correct node solution based upon a scenario. So what do I mean by that? So one of the questions might be, we want to run a JavaScript-based API that will respond to requests. What should we do to use that? Should we use Lightning Web Components, or should we use a Node.js server? And obviously, it's a Node.js-based system. Okay, so it's understanding that and when to use it. There's no specifics around any frameworks in there, so you won't be asked about Express or anything like that. You should understand the Node CLI to an extent, so it will be understanding some of the different flags on the CLI, how to run tests, how to start, how to stop, things like that. But it's really just a few commands. You will get asked about some of the core Node modules, though. So from memory, it was the file module and I think the HTTP module, which is there really to kind of handle requests. And then finally, there'll be a little bit on Node package management, which is obviously mainly around Node modules and things like that. So yeah, this one's a weird area. If you've done a lot of Node.js, then you'll probably find this really quick and easy. If you haven't, I would say to look into it. If you're ever interested in getting the Heroku Architect one, Node is my choice of language for Heroku. I've written on Ruby in it. I've written in Ruby for Heroku, and a bit of PHP and a bit of other languages. But yeah, I just personally find Node the easiest one to deploy up there and works really well. So, and that's personal preference. So yeah, it is a good way of introducing yourself as well to Node.js if you ever want to work some more with Heroku and if you want to work towards the Heroku designer exam. Okay. And then the final section that was there is testing. Now, it really doesn't go into detail in testing at all. I think, if I remember correctly, this is another one of those. There'll be 4 questions on. So I'm just going to jump back. Yeah, testing is 7% here, so 4 questions maximum. Therefore, I will pretty much guess for you that you will get a couple of questions where there will be an assertion, and it will ask you to say whether the assertion passes or fails, or if it's correctly formatted. Okay, so I'll be using console.assert, and then you can say, is it going to pass, is it going to fail, and why? Okay, that's it. There's no discussion of Jasmine or Jest or Makito or Mocha or, you know, any other framework that is out there, sign on, whatever it might be. It is just around using a very simple console.assert. Okay, so yeah, don't sweat that one too much, but do kind of read up on a little bit around it. You know, Salesforce have a testing excuse me. Salesforce have a testing framework for LWC which uses Jest. It is currently not a requirement for you to A, truly understand it, or B, to use it. However, and this is pure speculation on my behalf, so complete safe harbor, you know, no safe harbor, nothing, because there is no backing to this at all. This is purely my guessing and opinion. But I think if Salesforce have included it, there'll be a point in the future where they start to slowly enforce it being on there. So don't be surprised to see that going forward. In my personal opinion, it makes sense. Whether they do or not, who knows? But yeah, so there'll be a little bit on testing there. But again, it's not a requirement at the moment. You'll only get asked about a few simple assertions and whether they pass or fail. But yeah, I always find it really interesting that Salesforce spent a lot of time adding in that Jest test framework, and then there's not a lot of material on it. So I think there'll be more to come on that. So some resources to help you prepare for this, because I've just covered off, you know, a lot of stuff. And if you are fairly new to JavaScript, you probably, or even if you've been working with it for a while, you've probably just heard all that I've said and gone, oh my life, so much there. You know, there's a bunch of stuff you can go through to help out with this. So the top one here is the study for the Salesforce JavaScript Developer 1 exam Trailhead module. It is a really good Trailhead module. Cannot recommend that one highly enough. It goes through all of these things in detail. They link out to the Mozilla Developer Network docs, which I'll talk about in a second. It really is a very well written technical Trailhead module. You know, I'm sometimes with Trailhead I'm a fan, sometimes I'm not. I'll be honest, some of the modules I think are a bit too high level and lightweight, but this one was, you know, really, really well done. So whoever did that deserves a lot of praise. So definitely look into that. And even if it's just you look into it out of interest to see where your weak spots are, it will be fantastic for you to do that and understand some different areas. There is a course that Salesforce do that I teach, or I'm one of the teachers on. I'm actually teaching it on Monday next week, and it is called CRT 600. It is the certification preparation for Salesforce JavaScript Developer 1, and it is a day where I go through a couple of hundred slides, some demos, and things like that. And cover off all of the JavaScript you'll ever need to know for this exam. Okay, so everything is included in there. So if you want to find out about that and you are looking for some sort of guided lessons, that is a really good one to go through. There's then the You Don't Know JS books here down the bottom. So if you search for Kyle Simpson and You Don't Know JS, there's a series of books. I can post the link in a minute, in fact. They are free on GitHub. I have printed copies. I'd recommend buying a printed copy because Kyle's done a great job, and it's worth paying a few dollars, few pounds to support him. These are the best books you can buy on JavaScript, in my opinion, and really cover it off very, very well. And then finally, there's the Mozilla Developer Network as well. Mozilla of Firefox fame have got just a wealth of information on there. It is the best resource on the internet for JavaScript, and anything you want to know is in there. So any function at all will be on there. Okay, so that covers off the exam portion of the credential, which is one of the hurdles you've got to overcome, and there's a lot in there. The other piece is the super badge. Okay, so I mentioned at the start that I actually would say do the super badge first. This is because I did it the other way around, so I might just be biased. Okay, there is a very good chance that I am saying do it the other way to what I did, just because I would always recommend that people try a different thing out. The super badge contains a lot. Okay, it is really detailed, and that's also why I say it's a good thing to do up front, because it allows you to cover a lot of the JavaScript, but also can help you figure out how ready you are. I know that it took me way longer than I expected. There's a couple of the instructors at Salesforce have gone through this badge, and I've discussed with them, and they've said it's taken them 3-4 days to go through. I know some very kind of experienced JavaScript developers that have gone through it, and experienced LWC developers who also say it's taken a few days. So yeah, definitely plan some time for this one. There's a few badges you need first. So you'll need the LWC Quick Start, LWC and Salesforce Data, testing, and then coding for accessibility. All very worthwhile doing anyway. So again, start going through those, familiarize yourselves. If you haven't worked with Lightning Web Components anyway, those 4 modules are an extremely good way of learning Lightning Web Components. Okay, so really worthwhile doing. Around what you're going to be doing, you are going to build a boat app using Lightning Web Components. So it's for boat rentals. So you'll be searching for boats based upon a geography and a type and things like that. It will cover every aspect of Lightning Web Components. So it will cover events and rendering and third-party libraries and Aura and styling and all sorts. Just everything is in there. Okay. My biggest bit of advice is read through the entire. It's like a page, just a long page of requirements. Read through it all in extreme detail. Okay. Because there is just so much in there, and try and kind of extract bits as you go. I would personally say complete it using the text and then review the challenges. The challenges in the text are not in the same order. So if you try and do the challenges first, you will often find yourself jumping around the text, and it loses some of the flow in it. So my advice is, again, do it using the text, understand what's going on, and then when you've got to the end and you think you've covered it off, then review the challenges. Pay very close attention. I got caught out a number of times with requirements that felt like they were sort of a one-word requirement. And it might just be that I was a bit, honestly, I could have been a bit laissez-faire. At this point, when I was taking this, I'd already passed the JavaScript piece. I was lining up to teach these things. So yeah, just pay close attention and really give it your thought. And be aware, as I said, it will take some time. This isn't a super badge you can rock up and knock out in a day. If you manage to do it in a day, fantastic. But I don't believe you'll be able to do it in a day without some luck or magic, honestly. And yeah, then once you've done both, you get your certificate. So you get a nice shiny certification like this. As you can see, mine was awarded back in July. It's another one to add onto the list. It is still quite a rare one. Even now, a few months later, I don't think there's hundreds of people with it. So it's a really good differentiator out there in the marketplace. I'm helping a client of mine at the moment, a large organization, start to hire people for their long-term Salesforce development team. And one of the things I'm telling them is, if you can find someone who's got this certification, grab them as soon as you can. There's not a lot out there, but if you can find it, grab them. And that is all I had to share. So, I'm more than happy to take any questions we've got. When you're going through all this stuff, remember the different types of headaches you can have here, and prepare for them, because JavaScript will make your head hurt. And yeah, if you have any questions following this as well, or things you want to catch up on, P Battisson on Twitter, or /in/Paul Battisson. And yeah, happy to take any questions right now. I'll just stop sharing and can take any questions we've got.
So for the test, Paul, you said it's not required to do the actual testing, but how much do you recommend when building the Lightning Web Components, putting the test cases for them?
So this is a thing that I will say honestly, hand on heart at the moment. I don't write a lot of JavaScript tests for Lightning Web Components. Some I do, some I don't. If I am writing a component internally we have our own library of components that we reuse again and again across clients. For those, I've spent a bit more time, writing some tests and doing things because they're used in a lot of places. The big conundrum is often clients as a consultant, if you say to them, I want to spend some time writing tests, they'll say, great, does Salesforce require it? And you go, well, no. And then they'll say, well, I'm not paying for it. So if you're planning on reusing something a lot, and you have clear requirements and it's not going to change a lot, then I definitely recommend doing so. With another client I'm working with at the moment, we've got a number of Lightning web components in there with no tests because of the fact that we're working in a very kind of different and iterative method. Every kind of couple of weeks, these components are changing and being redirected as well, and the client just isn't willing to pay for it. And so commercially, I can't make it fit. But from a personal perspective, for the ones I write and reuse everywhere, I do it. Does that help or make sense?
Yes, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I know it doesn't require us to put the test cases when we deploy the Lightning Web Components. So that's why I was asking.
No, and I think that's kind of what I think is really interesting about it, is that A, that Salesforce have it in there, B, that they don't require you to have any, and yeah, it's that thing of getting different clients to understand the value of it. I'd say most Lightning Web Component implementations for consultants anyway on a client side are one-offs. So you're building a single Lightning component for going on a single page in a single use case. So there's less risk. But yeah, if you're releasing something to the App Exchange for definite, I'd recommend doing it.
Yeah, makes sense in that case.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, that was a great session, Paul. Thanks so much.
No worries. More than happy to share, and glad you enjoyed it. It's a really interesting exam. So I cannot recommend studying that one enough. I think it's a really good thing I think it's also a good thing for Apex developers to be able to look at another language, because I think it just makes you a better developer overall by seeing the differences in there.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.
No worries.
Okay, once I get download.